Welcome to this week's episode of the Veriswap podcast and YouTube video. How's it going, Gary?
Pretty good. No, not too bad. Not too bad. How about you?
Pretty good. Good to see the Golden Gate Bridge in the background has changed, and the audio is much higher quality today. So we're off to a good start.
Yeah.
What have you been up to?
So I mean, I think that right now these days, mostly I think it's just kind of catching up with like the crypto markets have been kind of pretty crazy at the moment. Like NFTs are continuing to be crappy. On the card space, I think it's really I think really been on the sidelines mostly, but really kind of intently watching because there've been a lot of high profile things like the mantle and all that kind of stuff that have the auctions have recently ended. But also really, I think as we'll probably end up talking about, like interesting things have happened in China, and so it's trying to get a grasp for what is going on out there in the hobby.
So what interesting things have been happening in China, Gary?
Well, somebody that I think is familiar to a lot of us, an Instagrammer by the name of Blake, I guess, who has historically been doing a lot of buying and selling on behalf of Chinese buyers, or I guess maybe Asia buyers on PWCC Gold and all that kind of stuff. Allegedly, right? Like I'm not the one that has seen any pictures of it, but allegedly got stopped by police. I guess I'll put it that way. And it's kind of, at least amongst the Asian community or my friends I talk to, it is a bit of a shock. It is a bit scary. Because obviously, like I don't think any of us are in the hobby with the expectation that police seizures or police seizures can be involved. But I mean, for me, like a big part of what I've always really loved or wanted more for is like a more much stronger cross-border relationship between the Western side, like the American side of the hobby, and the Chinese side. Because I mean, Chinese people love basketball as much, if not more, than a lot of other regions in the Western world, especially, or even other sports like F1, soccer, things like that. But sometimes it just feels like, even to this day, it feels like just simply the Pacific Ocean or language barriers or trust barriers, like something's just still hasn't connected. So things like this is still like, it's an unfortunate story. But I also think that something like this would never happen if it wasn't for the fact that the hobby has also grown so much in Asia. So in that sense, that's kind of a very kind of interesting, development in that sense.
Yeah, definitely an interesting development. Like you said, like I think the government wouldn't start cracking down on something like this if they didn't view cards as a legitimate investable asset worth something, right? So it's something that definitely put them on the on the radar. I think what was also particularly unfortunate was like Blake honestly did a lot in terms of bridging the East and the West when it came to buying and selling. For example, like we used to talk a lot, and he would host these like sessions for his customers, basically on like how to bid on golden auctions, how to bid on PWCC, all translated in Chinese. Like he would have these graphics, have like Zoom meetings to basically explain like how the bidding works, how the extended bidding works, how the 20% premium works, how taxes and fees work, right? Like he would go through and hold people's hands, like how to do it. So I think like we were just kind of like getting to the point where like, okay, we're kind of reducing the barriers. So it's like, I think to me, like it's unfortunate that like something like this would happen, where it's like, okay, like the Chinese government steps in and is like, like kind of like stops Blake from doing something like this. So that was kind of my experience with him as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like at that part, I didn't know, but like it almost makes me sadder and like more, certainly way more kind of sympathetic to his cause. And I hope it's just like a quick kind of like in and out type of thing, and he's kind of back to business in a way. But I think it's also, that's the kind of thing that really frustrates me sometimes, which is like it's a freaking hobby. Like it's like the thing I love is, literally it doesn't matter if you're talking to a billionaire or if you're talking to a person that, like works day to day kind of at like a local kind of convenience store. If you kind of get around each other with cards, people just talk to each other. Like, it definitely is like a connecting force. Um, and so this idea of bridging that gap as Blake has done, like it should at no point whatsoever be a hazardous job to get two communities together over something that's very, like just enjoyable and a way for people to just connect with each other. So I think that, it's a bit kind of taking a step backwards. For me, at least when I first heard that news, it felt like, yeah, like that kind of bridge, that kind of side of it is really taking a step back, so to speak, even though I mean, COVID already, made some barriers kind of increased in that sense. But still, like there's stuff like the poly auctions, like where like that Kobe went completely nuts in price.
Gary, what is
Amongst
poly
other
auctions?
pieces. Poly auctions is it's just kind of like it's one of the two. It's hard to say whether they're Sotheby's or whether they're Christie's, but then they are one of the top two traditional auction houses in China. Especially literally the response to Christie's and Sotheby's. So they sell fine art, porcelains, like, things like that. And so for them recently to have launched a sports card kind of auction is quite also a big deal, in the sense that it really goes to show that they must believe, like for a traditional auction house to be convinced that this is actually an investable asset or their kind of high net worth consumer base is interested, is a super big deal. Because arguably, you can even say that the type of cards that were on that auction, like the Kobe Eminence and like a Curry NT buyback, these are cards that I don't think would appear in a Sotheby's or Christie's auction, really. And so it's kind of really is a testament to like the forward lookingness or like the willingness for that auction house to take on these types of assets.
Now, is Poly only doing like are they doing a dedicated card auction, or is it kind of like lumped in with a few other things?
So to my understanding, it was lumped into other things, but then just like how Heritage is like during the course of the live auction, it gets to the section where everything is like back to back to back like cards.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
We saw their catalog, and like they actually like number the catalogs like cards. I think they printed like 1,250 copies, and then like every copy of the catalog was like serial numbered. It looked really cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing that I always had this interesting opportunity about China, which is so many of the things you see in the US card market, everything from like repacks to like catalogs from high-end auction houses. I mean, the manufacturing king of the world is still China in terms of like making, manufacturing interesting or having little like touches on like just like a nice wooden box for like your repack or a auction house booklet like with a serial number on it, right? And so that's another reason I just feel like number one, well, like things are way more degen when it comes to, pseudo gambling type things in the country. And two, the manufacturing capability is so great that you can make the unboxing experience, or you can make the overall kind of touch and feel of any of these assets that you see in Western markets, like feel way awesomer.
Yeah.
And yeah, like that's one of the biggest things I'm most excited for to see when the hobby kind of expands out there, is how do they really take the ceremony of it to the next level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like nowadays you don't even see like any of the major auction houses have catalogs, right? Everything is like electronic. I'm sure you could like order it, or I think maybe you have to like pay for it. But I think like even like physically having like the catalog is like really cool. It's having like a coffee table book. I've always personally enjoyed the touch and feel of like seeing some of these really cool cards go on auction.
Oh yeah, I mean, I still like those, but like a lot of the times, like card discovery for me, just because I mean, like no offense to like Golden or those still I would say like all of those websites, whether you're Heritage or Golden or PWCC, I think all of them will openly admit or even have admitted that they have a lot of work to do to make their site better or like faster to navigate or more modern, because it is sad. I think I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one, but it's way faster for me to figure out what are the cool cards or items on an upcoming auction when I see their book.
Yeah, when you see the book, you also get like more like, I guess like more of the story behind it, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't remember which I think it might have been like Heritage. I like picked up like one of their books once, and it kind of like showed like the story behind every card, especially like the really high end stuff, like the provenance of it. So I think that was really cool. Whereas like on like auction sites, sometimes you don't really see that level of detail. But I guess there is like a lot of overhead.
Mhm.
One thing that you mentioned was the Kobe Eminence. Can you talk a little bit about that? I was a little bit shocked when you told me that story.
Yeah, so that happened at nationals, and I think that maybe I don't know whose system maybe is expertly timed. I think it's too much of a coincidence not to be in a way. But there's a live stream actually of that auction. There's a Kobe Eminence. It was like the championship tag. It was basically like this kind of like tag patch of like the number of trophies that the Lakers won, and it's a numbered 1 out of 2. I think Eric was telling me that the other one of the two was already owned by a Philippines collector who you might know, I think. Um, and this was, I guess, the 2 of 2. And I think for all of us in the hobby, like historically, if I think about like Eminence, it's like, hey, would I like to rip one? Yeah, of course. It's like it costs more than a Tesla to rip. But at the same time, those cards do not have like the same value as say a Kobe like limited logo or a like exquisite auto, right? And I think it's just been well understood that this is the hierarchy. And then out of nowhere, it goes on this Chinese auction. And then after BP, like Spinatron posts, I think he basically just broke the story, right? He posts and it breaks 600K, which is like
Yeah,
oh
that's
my god, like if he fat fingered it and like accidentally hit one extra zero, I totally believe that. I was like, oh yeah,
yep.
60K, that's kind of high for that card,
Yeah,
like so I mean that was a big like celebration for the hobby in a way. Like it's like, oh my gosh, like that was part of the thesis, I think, for me is just having different geographies to collect means that people might have different rules, right? Like the hierarchies might not be the same. Like Eminence might not be treated in the same way, right? Or like people might not totally obsess over only rookie cards, right? And maybe are into years when they won MVP or years that they won the championship. And this feels like, one of those indications.
yeah, that's really crazy. I mean, like for that to happen, two bidders have to really want that card, right? Not just one person. So to think that like two people really just like duked it out at the end is crazy, and the fact that it reached up to 600K, that is insane.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I'm sure like I wonder like, yeah, does that increase the demand for Eminence Kobe's moving forward,
yeah, I don't know. Thing is, no one in America talked about this sale. Like, I didn't see anyone talk about it. Like, that was probably like one of the most shocking things I'd seen this month, or last month.
Well, yeah.
And I didn't hear about it from anyone apart from you.
Yeah, that's I mean that's again going back to the thing that we've been talking about, right? I think it's really embarrassing in 2022, not towards anybody in particular, but it's just embarrassing for the hobby that in 2022 with all this like so much venture money, so much internet access available, that literally there's such thing as like information asymmetry of like a $600,000 card, you know. And but in a good way, it just shows like how much how much space there is or like progress that can be made to really open the market to like a global thing,
Yeah,
um
pretty crazy.
and
Makes you
as
wonder. Oh, sorry, continue.
oh no, I was just going to say is that it really, as we're talking about, it just occurred to me that that card is now worth, quote unquote, the market value of that card is now worth more than the black label Kobe chrome refractor.
Yeah, that ended last night on Heritage for what, 450K? A
Yep.
pop one of two Kobe Bryant black refractor
Oh,
rookie.
and they're both pop too. That's right. But yeah, like I would, if I owned that card, like no offense to the winner, maybe that was a good buy, but like to know that there's an Eminence Kobe that's worth more than that card would hurt me a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I think that Kobe refractor definitely went low, and the Eminence definitely went very, very high. But
Yeah.
you never know kind of like what kind of the backstory is. But that's insane. Yeah, 600K makes you wonder a couple questions like what that would do, how much that would do on an American auction site, right? There are a lot of monsters, especially lately, that have been dropping on these American auction sites. So like I feel like it'd be cool to kind of be like, okay, like what if this thing has sold for somewhere else?
Yeah.
Like that's 600K is insane. Did you see any other like crazy high prices in
I
that poly
gotta, I
auction?
gotta, I gotta look up the I actually that's a good point. I should look up the results for the other auction items because there was that one you were telling me about that I'd never even heard about or even occurred, which is the Curry anti RPA buyback.
Yep.
So that was on there. There's a lot of Kobe's on there. But yeah, I think like next time we'll definitely kind of I'll share some of the interesting ones that came from that last auction. But given how much of a blowout, I think in my opinion, blowout success this was for Poly, I think I mean we'll probably see more of these to come for sure. The only thing I question, like going back to that Blake side, is like how are we gonna, how is the hobby gonna get these assets into the country to
Right.
even be auctioned to begin with?
Right. Yeah. I mean, like if you ship stuff to China, theoretically, you should be paying custom taxes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that the truth, right, like that's really unavoidable is that while there are plenty of genuine collectors who love, and are super nerdy about this, at the same time, like it is not unreasonable to say like cardboard is probably on a per gram braid basis, like potentially the most efficient money laundering device there is outside of crypto. But crypto is like probably harder these days because everything is on chain and like, government regulation, all that kind of stuff. So, that danger is inherently there, right? And that kind of scrutiny is always going to be there. Like, are you doing this to, for collector purposes or are you doing it for other reasons? I mean, the same can be said about the fine art market too.
Yeah. That's yeah. The money laundering aspect is always going to open a lot of questions. How do you think these like very curious, like how do you think these breakers or like card shops in China currently are paying taxes, if at all?
Oh,
Customs duties.
um, so I think so a lot of, I know a lot of the cards are coming in through the south of China, whether you're
Okay.
talking about like Hong Kong, Guangzhou, like, Taiwan, things. I mean, that's where they always enter kind of into that general territory.
Hmm.
Now what happens at the border, to be honest, I have no clue. Shout out to Eric. I remember he mentioned not to put Chrome cards through a TSA, like scanner because apparently Chrome cards like make the thing go crazy. I guess
Yeah.
maybe that's why the box of Prism got opened at
Oh, I guess.
TSA at Nationals.
Yeah.
Probably, so yeah, let that be known. Don't put your Chrome cards through X-rays. Um, so do they pay taxes? I mean, I think that just like I think it's probably fair to say that it's probably the same kind of dynamic as it is here, where
Right.
I know like last year in 2020, 2021, like a lot of breakers I knew like had huge days of reckoning because they were like, oh well, I'm just gonna run everything on PayPal or run everything on Cash App. Yeah, they don't report. I'm gonna do my own self-reporting. And like lo and behold, like 1099 comes and then you kind of have to do that. So I'm sure a lot of breakers are doing it kind of informally. Now, actually, sorry, no, I take that back because so much of breaking in the China side actually happens over Chinese TikTok, like Douyin.
Yeah.
And over there, like Douyin has kind of a couple of e-commerce features that the American one has yet to have. That's basically just like direct buy from the app, so no third party thing, just like straight up transact.
Yeah.
And so for that, like especially given how much the infrastructure is built on WeChat Pay, Alipay, like the government already knows. So like reporting everything's already automated, all that kind of stuff. So I would imagine that uh, taxes are being paid, given the number one platform for this stuff is already, um,
Strictly monitored.
Strictly monitored, yeah.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Uh, yeah, it seems like probably even more regulated in China than it is in America. With even though America has like a lot more of an established hobby presence.
Yeah, but on the note, on the breaking side, like, especially like the other thing about the hobby in China is there was always this overarching belief in the country that they get crappy boxes, right, from the distributors, like that ones that just don't hit.
Oh, really? I've
Um,
never heard of that before. Why is that?
and well, so the thing is that it's true and it's not true if you think about it very rationally. Like China just gets so little percentage of the total allocation, because the allocation's been long set and like owned by the GTS's Southern Hobbies of the world, Leighton, Platinum, all that kind of stuff. They already get the lion's share of it. Now, if you get, like, I don't have any particular number on this, but let's say hypothetically you get like 5% of the supply, right? Well, I mean, statistically speaking, you're going to get only 5% of the chance to actually hit a logo man or to hit like an RPA of the top rookie. So of course, like the perception, like if you only get that little and you're ripping in China, like the perception is that, oh, we never hit. Well, yeah, statistically, you're only going to hit like 1 in 20 times, right? Or
Right.
1 in 20 seasons, so 2 decades. But thanks to clever people in the hobby that figured out ways to get more boxes into the country, they've been hitting more, right? And in particular, right, like the one that really set off the whole kind of fervor for NT, like in a time when some breakers are underwater in China, sitting on product like lower end products, whether it's like hoops or Revolution or optics, whatever. NT is still selling like hotcakes, particularly because an Asian breaker pulled the Zion, right? The Zion logo
Yeah.
man. And then like during nationals, the Jalen Green logo man auto got pulled. And in that same case, the Steph Curry logo man got pulled.
Yep.
And then a couple weeks later, a Steph Curry auto logo man got pulled. And so I think these things are. I'm also a believer that, even though it makes no rational sense, but for a card to get pulled in a particular geography obviously helps that geography have a greater sense of belief that, oh yeah, things can, these breaks are actually worth participating in.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think like even after the pull, right, like those cards are more likely to be transacted within that geography too. So there's that certain level of hype surrounding it, right? Like that Zion logo man 1 of 1 that was later sold to someone in Asia, right?
Yeah.
So like there's also kind of like the secondary market where the cards will float around and transact from person to person.
Definitely. Yeah, because like these yeah, like every hobby they need, like, I mean, just like with the mantle, right? Like every hobby needs like cards at every level, but it really starts at like that aspirational one at the top. Like who's that king of the hill that everyone reads about and everyone's like, yeah, I really wish I had that card. And then when you can't afford that card, you just settle for, maybe like the third best card or the fourth best card. And then that just kind of drives the hobby wild at every single level, because there is that theory that all of us are really in the hobby and we like to collect things, but then we're always trying to move up. We're trying to move higher up the scale, right? I always try to trade up for the, like, Veriswap up for the better and bigger patch or the better card someday.
Yes, exactly. Veriswap up to get your upgrades on your cards. The yeah, yeah, definitely agree with that. One thing I've noticed in like the Chinese marketplace is just like I have a few like Chinese marketplaces downloaded on my phone. There's it seems like the cards tend to be a little bit more higher end, which makes me believe like either like people are just keeping the lower end stuff or just like throwing it away. Maybe
Yeah,
because like it's harder to grade and there's kind of like no purpose in like keeping, you know, Darius
that's
Beasley
actually a
Prism
very
case.
fascinating point. Yeah, because grading, I mean, one, it's getting more and more expensive. Two, I think card values aren't as, I mean, for this year aren't exploding the way they did last 2 years. So yeah, the ROI, and I'm not even talking about from just a, like, from not from like an income generating purpose, but if I'm just thinking as a collector, like what's the value I get from grading my card? If it's a low end card and I have to wait for international shipping, and I have to take the risk of shipping it overseas, is pretty trash, I think, because the costs have only gone up, and the odds that things get lost in the mail have only gone up. And so you're right. Like it would take a lot more of a heavy of a hit for me to even contemplate grading. Unless someday we start to see, yeah, like local on-site grading for Asia.
Local
You
on-site
know,
grading for Asia. No rumors of that happening yet, but hopefully that'll expand the market down the road. I one other thing that I've noticed is I don't know if we've talked about this before, Gary, but there seems to also be an issue of like shipping Chinese cards to America. Like I was helping Blake with something a few months ago where his cards got seized by customs because customs thought that his cards were fake. He had basically like sent a package over for consignment to Probstein, and then customs saw the card and they're like, oh, like these are all counterfeits. So it was like a month-long process where he had to like hire a lawyer. Lawyer had to like write some sort of letter. He had to like pay the lawyer a few $1,000s. Eventually the cards got released. But I think like he actually had to like submit them to some grading company to prove authenticity in order for the customs to release them. And I think part of the issue, I think part of what caused it was like the cards were shipped in like an old Panini box, like, just like a box that was ripped.
yeah.
So they, I think the customs must have saw that and been like, oh, like that was a repackaged product, right? And it's definitely a counterfeit.
That's brutal. That's so, but terrifying too. Oh my gosh. Like, it's like, yeah, I mean, on the optimistic side, one would like to think that, okay, maybe the old box is why it got stopped. On the other hand, it's something where it wouldn't be beyond my belief to think that people every once in a while that are handling these packages recognize what they see,
Right.
and essentially hold it for a hostage in a way. And so, yeah, like all the stories of, wax getting opened like across the mail, like these FedEx boxes, right, that end up empty when you get them, or like that GI Joe packs in the middle, like it is super duper scary, which is a reminder of the need for trusted escrows, in all kinds of transactions. So
You're right.
it's like Veriswap.
Oh, I never heard of that before. Yeah, that's kind of like also like a consideration for like why Veriswap we wanted to kind of limit it to domestic shipments, because like shipping internationally, I think there's still like a lot of like pain points where it's like you're never going to know like what's going to happen with customs. You never know how long customs going to hold the package. Thankfully, like I haven't had like any terrible experience with customs, but like I've heard like horror stories from friends where it's like, it's a whole legal process to kind of like unlock your package once it's in the hands of the customs officers.
Yeah, I mean, that is one thing in favor of one convenience factor, right, that like NFTs have delivered is the fact that it is a bit of a it does kind of solve the cross-border kind of shipping issue. But yeah, like you're saying, right, like I think one way or the other, like the hobby needs to figure out, which I think is very interesting. I don't know too many people who are currently addressing that. I think you were telling me about a company a while back that was doing kind of international shipping for cards. But yeah, like there's a lot of these, I guess you could say, quote unquote, unsexy, like invisible businesses in the hobby that would actually be kind of pretty interesting opportunities, as opposed to another grading company, another vaulting company, another, like auction house, so to speak. There's plenty, I think, of work to be done on the back end as well.
What do you think are some examples of these unsexy businesses?
So one definitely, like we mentioned before, is around like logistics shipping, basically just getting it from one place to the other. Escrow, basically just being middleman between transactions, especially like larger transactions, I think is still a very important one. I think that we still haven't reached the point where listing and getting your cards up into the internets and properly documented and that seamless yet. That I think is another big one. Let's see. I think there's a lot of also, I would guess, progressively more progress to be even made around the financial, it's like the whole securitization of it. I don't mean like fractionalization. I mean like issuing loans against things and insurance and stuff like that. Because it feels to me even now, it's like people are still not terribly satisfied with the insurance levels they
Yep.
get or the valuations they get. And so it seems like there's more like data science or something that can be put into the equation to get that to be improved. And then there's one I was thinking on the top of my head. I feel like no, I think those are it.
I think that, yeah, I definitely agree with the insurance part, right? Like when I ask my friends, like, oh, how many of you guys have insurance? The answer is always like, I don't have insurance. I just kind of hope that stuff arrives.
Yep.
And but I'm thinking about getting insurance soon. But then I asked them a few months later, I'm like, did you get insurance? They're like, no. And then you always hear these like stories of like packages like getting lost or something in the mail. And it's like, the clear answer is like, oh, the sender should always pay out. And because they should have an insurance policy. But then, the awkward part is like, oh, the sender is like, oh, by the way, I didn't have an insurance policy. It just seems like such an easy solution, but it seems like people aren't educated enough, or like, maybe they just don't want to pay the insurance premium to kind of for the peace of mind. But I think that's kind of the space where I feel like there's a ton of opportunity. Also in terms of like even like information asymmetry, right? Like it's hard to know when and where card shows are happening. There's that Instagram account called the Show Locator.
Yeah.
But it's still like not very clear where the card shows are happening. So like the data is just like super unorganized. It'd be cool if there was like a better way to kind of see where card shows are happening. And I think that helps immensely with like building community, right? If people don't know cards are happening, there's don't know shows are happening, there's no way they're actually going to go to the show.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I agree, especially like the fact that it feels to me as if like card shows are really, even if the hobby is kind of, not like parabolic as it was 2 years ago, it feels like local card shows are making a comeback.
Oh, like, yeah, I think so, yeah.
Which is awesome, really, because I think it also makes it more accessible for the kids to get into it and see the cards and like interact with people. So that's fun. And I in a way I also wish that there was more of these card shows or more like things that are not in like the traditional everyone tables card show, but like when you took me to show like the how trade night is and people just like take over the floor of a hotel. Like it feels like more of that also would be pretty fun because it feels actually to me lower pressure, like much chiller, much more like socialization, community building.
Yep.
Even if people do transact still, but it feels like that vibe is pretty welcoming and friendly,
Yeah, my favorite part about those is like everyone's on the same level, right?
Yeah.
When you go to a show floor, the power dynamic is obviously shifted towards the vendor setting up.
Yeah.
Right. And in my opinion, I think they get an unfair hand over the people who are walking around, even though, setting up a table, moving inventory around is like not that expensive if you really think about it. So yeah, like I definitely, just like those casual hangouts where, people just meet each other and maybe do a deal on the side. I personally prefer that as well. Maybe there's a model for like a new type of card show, right? Or, it's just more of like gatherings, hang out, eat some food together, talk about cards, transact, not necessarily about strictly buying and selling.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that'll be another interesting one, especially like, I'm not saying this is a solution, but like, there's a lot of other kind of sectors outside of the card space that have found kind of interesting things, whether it's like Zoom or maybe even like Zoom plus, right? Like the metaverse type things where people can kind of just gather together. And I think for a lot of people that like I've talked to too, this idea of any kind of community where you're actually just talking about cards without the direct pressure to transact is also much needed, especially something that can be done online.
Yep. Yeah, definitely agree. It's I think like these forums like Blowout or Facebook are cool, but like it's a little bit slower moving.
Yeah.
Something that's like, maybe a little bit faster moving, maybe like a chat room or something where people can just like just drop in and talk about cards, right?
Yep.
I think that would be really cool. Just people when they're bored at work, talk about cards, right? They're sitting at home after dinner, log on, talking about cards, right? I think that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we are running a little bit short on time. But any other thoughts on any of the topics that we talked about, Gary, before we wrap up?
Well, it just occurs to me, I was looking on Card Ladder and I realized that, I mean, it was pretty obvious, but then like, yeah, like a lot of the definitely the transaction data that comes from like, Chinese kind of, so Chinese, I was going to say exchanges, but Chinese marketplaces and like poly auctions are absolutely not listed right on Card Ladder. So in a way, it's like, I wonder how much missing kind of richness of information, is kind of left on the table, so to speak, right? Just because this barrier still exists.
Correct. Yeah. I think like some people, back when I used to trade a lot, like people, they would actually like throw around the term like, oh, this card did X number of dollars on Chinese eBay last night. So
Yeah.
it seems like the industry is like getting a little bit sharper in terms of like knowing that there's other sources of information out there. However, like I think until these like larger card pricing tools start incorporating that data, it'll be difficult for the widespread public to kind of accept it as truth.
Yep.
But we definitely have to go through the poly auction for the prices stuff. That is definitely something that's very interesting to me. I'm always like very fascinated when it's like certain specific like niche cards sell for like way above what I anticipate. Like I don't know if you remember, like a few months ago, Golden sold a Bill Russell Exquisite out of 7, out of 6,
Yeah.
or out of pretty sure it's out of 6.
It was the number card, right?
It was
Like,
a number card. It
yeah.
did like 100K or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like that was insane to me. Just like seeing like anonymous, like I'm always like, why? Right? It's always like very
Yeah.
interesting though. So yeah, we'll have to take a deeper look into that as well.
Yep. Cool.
Awesome. Well, yeah, let's call it at that for this week. Great chatting, Gary, and
Yeah.
we'll see you on soon.
Great.